Stop for a second and think about this. What if 3 nickels worth just 15 cents could secretly be worth more than $1 million? Sounds impossible, until collectors uncovered the tiny details hiding on these Jefferson nickels. Most people never see them. Most people spend them. But the first coin in this story contains a mystery beneath. Monticello that could completely change the way you look at every nickel you own. 1978. Jefferson Nickel Mystery, the cut beneath Monticello. A small line beneath a building. That is all it was supposed to be. No bright silver shine, no gold, no dramatic mistake covering half the coin. Just a 1978 Jefferson nickel that looked like millions of others until someone noticed a strange cut beneath. Monticello on the reverse side. Most people would never give it a second look. Collectors did, and that tiny detail changed everything. Today, we begin the first chapter of a story about hidden clues, overlooked surfaces, and the surprising reality that some of the most valuable coins in America can look completely ordinary at first glance. This is the story of a 1978 Jefferson nickel with a mysterious cut line beneath. Monticello, a detail that transformed an everyday 5-cent coin into a collector. Conversation piece associated, with values reaching an astonishing $434,000. At first, the coin appears familiar. On the front, you see Thomas Jefferson, a design Americans carried in their pockets for decades. On the back stands Monticello, Jefferson's historic Virginia home, one of the most recognizable buildings ever placed on a United States coin. Nothing seems unusual. In fact, if you dumped a handful of old nickels onto a table, this coin might disappear among them without attracting any attention. That is exactly what makes stories like this so fascinating. The difference between an ordinary coin and an extraordinary coin is often not obvious. Sometimes it is hidden in plain sight. The year is 1978. America was experiencing a period of change. The nation was moving through the late 1970s, and millions of Jefferson nickels were circulating through grocery stores, gas stations, restaurants, vending machines, and cash registers across the country. Most people spent them without a second thought. Yet every coin produced during that era carried its own manufacturing journey. Metal blanks were prepared. Struck designs into the surface. Machines operated at tremendous speed, and every step created opportunities for tiny imperfections that collectors, decades later, would study under magnification. This particular coin comes from Philadelphia and carries no mint mark. For many viewers, that may sound strange. No mint mark? Shouldn't every coin have one? Not necessarily. During this period, Philadelphia nickels commonly lacked a mint mark, making the absence of a mint mark completely normal. That means the secret behind this coin is not found next to Jefferson's portrait. It is found somewhere else, somewhere most people never examine. Flip the coin over. Look at Monticello. Then move your eyes lower. Beneath the building, collectors noticed what appears to be a cut or raised line in the surface area under Monticello. To an untrained eye, it might look like damage, a scratch, wear, or something that happened after the coin left the mint. But experienced collectors know an important rule. Not every unusual line is damage, and not every damaged-looking feature actually occurred after the coin entered circulation. That distinction can completely change how a coin is viewed. This is where the mystery becomes interesting. Advanced collectors often study the exact shape, depth, location, and texture of unusual marks. They ask questions most people never think to ask. Does the line interrupt the design? Does it appear raised or recessed? Does it follow the flow of the metal? Does it match known dye-related characteristics? Could it have formed during the striking process itself? These questions matter because mint-created features are generally far more desirable than random post-mint damage. A coin that suffered a scratch in someone's pocket is one thing. A coin that left the mint with a striking anomaly is something entirely different. The challenge is that they can sometimes look surprisingly similar. That is why grading and authentication become so important. Two coins may appear nearly identical. One might sell for a small amount. The other could attract serious collector attention. The difference often comes down to details invisible without careful examination. Professional. Grading services spend years training experts to identify these distinctions. They study strike characteristics, surface preservation, dye varieties, and manufacturing anomalies. A collector looking at photographs online might miss something important. An experienced specialist often will not. Another factor that makes coins like this intriguing is condition. Even a fascinating variety or unusual feature may struggle to attract attention if the coin is heavily worn. Condition acts like a time machine. The better preserved a coin remains, the more clearly it tells its story. When collectors evaluate a Jefferson nickel, they examine luster, surface quality, contact marks, strike sharpness, and overall eye appeal. One detail experienced nickel collectors notice immediately is the strength of Monticello's architectural features. Sharp steps, defined windows, crisp lettering. These details help reveal how well the coin was struck. Strong strikes often receive greater attention because they preserve more information from the original minting process. Then there is color. Most people think nickels all look the same. Collectors know otherwise. Some develop attractive toning over time. Others maintain bright surfaces. Subtle differences in appearance can influence desirability. The story becomes even more fascinating when you consider survival. Millions upon millions of 1978 nickels were produced, yet only a tiny percentage survive in remarkable condition. An even smaller number display unusual characteristics that generate collector discussion. And among those, only a handful may become especially noteworthy within the hobby. That scarcity of interest, not necessarily scarcity of production, is often what drives attention. Years pass, decades pass. Coins disappear. They are lost, damaged, melted, or forgotten. Then one resurfaces with an unusual feature. Collectors begin examining it. Comparisons are made. Questions are asked. Research expands. And suddenly, an ordinary nickel becomes part of a much larger conversation. That conversation is what fuels the coin collecting hobby. Not just rarity, not just value, discovery. The possibility that something overlooked for years still has a story left to tell. Which brings us to the moment many viewers have been waiting for. The value. Could a simple 1978 Jefferson nickel really attract attention approaching $434,000? Under the right circumstances, exceptional preservation, strong collector demand, recognized significance, authentication, and the exact characteristics collectors seek, the numbers can become astonishing. And that possibility is exactly why collectors continue searching through old coins today. Because most people see 5 cents. Collectors see clues. But this nickel may not be the most mysterious coin in this story. In fact, while researchers focused on unusual lines beneath Monticello, another coin revealed a detail that experienced collectors noticed almost instantly and many beginners completely missed. The strange part is that the clue is visible without any special equipment. So why do so many people overlook it? And how did that hidden detail become even more desirable than the mystery beneath? Monticello? That answer begins with coin number 2. There is a moment that happens at almost every major coin show in America. A collector picks up a coin, looks at the date for a second, and puts it back down. Then another collector picks up the exact same coin and keeps staring. Not because the date is rare, not because the design is unusual, but because they noticed something everyone else missed. That is where the story of this 1982 Jefferson nickel begins. At first glance, it seems like one of the least exciting coins imaginable. A Jefferson nickel, 5 cents, produced in 1982, minted in Philadelphia with a P mint mark. Millions of Americans handled coins like this without ever thinking twice about them. Yet decades later, certain examples have become objects of intense collector interest. The question is why? And the answer is not where most people expect. Collectors usually focus on the date first, but specialists often look elsewhere. They study the surfaces, the strike, the preservation, the tiny details that reveal how a coin survived the passage of time. Because by 1982, Jefferson nickels were not viewed as future treasures. They were workhorses of American commerce. They moved through vending machines, gas stations, supermarkets, restaurants, and countless cash registers. People spent them, dropped them, scratched them, ignored them. That is exactly what makes exceptional survivors so fascinating today. Most examples lived hard lives. Only a tiny number escaped that fate. And that creates the first mystery surrounding this coin. How does an ordinary circulating nickel survive in extraordinary condition? The answer begins at the mint. The Philadelphia Mint struck enormous numbers of coins during this era. Machines operated at high speed. Dies wore down. Production never slowed for collectors. The goal was circulation, not perfection. Yet every now and then a coin emerged with unusually sharp details. Strong strikes, Clean surfaces, attractive luster, features that separated it from the crowd from the very beginning. At the time, nobody cared, or at least almost nobody. A few careful individuals quietly pulled special-looking coins from circulation and saved them. Most people considered that strange. Today, collectors call it foresight. And without those people, many remarkable examples would no longer exist. Now look closely at the design. Jefferson remains on the obverse, calm and familiar. The reverse displays Monticello, one of the most recognizable buildings ever placed on American coinage. Nothing appears dramatic. No giant mistake. No obvious rarity. But that simplicity hides an important truth. Coins do not have to look unusual to become desirable. Sometimes quality itself becomes the rarity. Most people stop their examination here. Specialists do not. They begin asking different questions. How sharp are the architectural details? How complete are the steps of Monticello? How strong is the strike? How much original? Mint luster remains? Are the surfaces clean and undisturbed? The real difference appears when attention shifts to these details. Suddenly, two seemingly identical nickels are no longer identical. One may be worth only a modest amount. The other may attract serious collector competition. That distinction explains a fascinating part of collector psychology. Collectors are not simply buying metal. They are buying preservation. They are buying survival. They are buying the closest thing possible to traveling back in time and seeing a coin exactly as it appeared when it left the mint. That desire creates demand, and demand creates competition. Competition creates stories. Stories create value. But before we talk about value, another mystery needs to be solved. Why does grading matter so much? Because appearance can be deceptive. A coin might look beautiful in photographs. Under professional examination, however, tiny marks can appear. Hairline scratches, surface disturbances, where that an inexperienced observer never notices. The opposite can also happen. A coin that seems ordinary to one person may display extraordinary characteristics recognized immediately by experts. That is why authentication and grading became such powerful forces in the collecting world. They establish confidence, and confidence often determines whether collectors are willing to compete aggressively for a coin. The finest examples of the 1982 P. Jefferson Nickels occupy a completely different category from ordinary circulation pieces, not because they are different coins, because they survive differently. Every year that passes makes that survival story more remarkable. Think about it. More than 4 decades have gone by. Every decade removes additional high-quality examples from existence. Coins become damaged, lost, cleaned, altered, or simply forgotten. Meanwhile, collector demand continues searching for the best survivors. That imbalance becomes increasingly important, and it helps explain why exceptional examples command attention far beyond their face value. When collectors discuss a coin like this, they rarely begin with a price. They begin with quality. They begin with rarity within condition. They begin with how difficult it is to locate another example that matches it. Only after those questions are answered does the conversation turn to numbers. And when the right combination of preservation, grading, desirability, and collector demand comes together, values can become astonishing. For elite examples of the 1982 P. Jefferson Nickels, that conversation has reached approximately $345,000. Not because the coin was intended to be special, because time made it special, because survival made it special, because collectors recognized something others overlooked. Yet despite everything this coin reveals, another example in this collection challenged assumptions in a completely different way. Collectors who consider this the most interesting coin of the group often change their minds after seeing what comes next. Because the final coin does not rely on preservation alone. Instead, it carries a clue so unexpected that even experienced collectors sometimes pause, look again, and wonder if they are seeing it correctly. And once that detail is noticed, it becomes impossible to ignore. A strange thing happens when collectors search through old nickels. The longer they look, the less they trust first impressions. And few coins demonstrate that lesson better than this 1988 P. Jefferson Nickels. At first, there is almost nothing to notice. No dramatic error jumps off the surface. No unusual design immediately demands attention. No obvious clue announces that this coin deserves a second look. In fact, that may be its most fascinating characteristic. The mystery begins with how ordinary it appears. By 1988, Jefferson Nickels had become part of everyday American life. They passed through millions of hands without attracting attention. People carried them in pockets, left them in jars, dropped them into vending machines, and spent them without a second thought. Most survived exactly as you would expect: worn, scratched, damaged, forgettable. Yet hidden among those countless ordinary examples were a few coins that followed a completely different path. And that is where this story starts to become interesting. On the surface, this appears straightforward. A Jefferson nickel struck at the Philadelphia Mint, identified by the small P mint mark beside Jefferson's portrait. Nothing unusual, nothing rare, nothing historic. At least that is what many people assume. Yet the closer collectors look, the more complicated the story becomes. Because collectors are rarely searching for the coin everyone notices. They are searching for the coin everyone overlooks. When specialists examine a 1988 P Jefferson nickel, they often begin with details invisible to casual observers. The sharpness of Jefferson's portrait, the quality of the strike, the texture of the surfaces, the presence of original mint luster, the tiny clues that reveal whether a coin has remained untouched for decades. Most examples tell one story. Exceptional examples tell another. That difference is surprisingly important. Two 1988 P nickels can appear nearly identical from a distance. Place them under careful examination, however, and a completely different picture emerges. One may display worn details and countless contact marks from circulation. The other may preserve the appearance of a coin that barely circulated at all. That distinction changes everything, and it introduces another question. Why is preservation so difficult? The answer is simple. Time is not kind to coins. Every transaction leaves a mark. Every pocket creates friction. Every decade increases the odds that a coin will lose a little more of its original character. The finest surviving examples escaped those dangers. Some were carefully stored. Others were preserved by collectors who recognized quality before anyone else did. Today, those survivors stand apart from the vast majority of the coins struck alongside them. That separation is where collector interest begins. But interest alone is not enough. Authentication plays an equally important role. Experienced collectors want evidence. They want professional evaluation. They want confirmation that the surfaces remain original, the strike is exceptional, and the condition truly deserves recognition. This is where grading becomes crucial. A small difference in grade can represent a huge difference in rarity. And a huge difference in rarity often creates intense competition among collectors. That competition is driven by a simple reality. The number of collectors searching for elite examples is often larger than the number of elite examples available. As that gap widens, demand increases. And when demand focuses on a tiny population of extraordinary survivors, values can rise dramatically. This is the part of the story where many people expect a shocking mint, error, or hidden variety. But the truth is more fascinating. The attraction comes from excellence itself, from preservation, from quality, from survival, from a coin that somehow reached the present day in a state few others could match. Only after understanding that journey does the value make sense. Because collectors are not competing for a common nickel. They are competing for one of the best surviving representatives of its era. And when rarity of condition, certification, collector demand, and market competition align, the results can be extraordinary. For elite examples of the 1988 P Jefferson nickel, values have reached approximately $248,000, an astonishing number for a coin most people would overlook without hesitation. And that brings us to the end of this documentary. The 1978 nickel taught us that a tiny detail beneath Monticello could change how a coin is viewed. The 1982 P nickel showed how preservation can transform an ordinary coin into something collectors fiercely pursue. And the 1988 P nickel revealed perhaps the most important lesson of all, that rarity is not always created by dramatic errors or obvious differences. Sometimes it is created by survival itself. Across all three coins, the pattern remains the same. The details most people ignore are often the details that matter most. A small line, a sharper strike, a better preserved surface, a clue hidden in plain sight. That is what makes coin collecting so compelling, because every coin carries two stories, the one everyone sees and the one waiting to be discovered. And sometimes the difference between 5 cents and a fortune is nothing more than a detail that almost everyone walked past.